Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is the February 21st, 2024 Planning Board meeting for the town of Harpswell. My name is Al LeGros, I'm the chair of the board, and I'd like to quickly go around and have everybody introduce themselves.
Howard Levitan, Oars Island.
Amy Hybel, the Neck.
Courtney Snellings, Oars Island.
Dan Hobeck, Oars Island.
I'm Mark Ironman, the town planner.
And we have our intrepid technicians back there who are recording this for posterity and possible Emmy Awards in the future. So, thank you very much. I'd like to begin by inviting everybody to join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. We have a quorum, and I'd like everybody here to be voting members tonight. We have, looking at the agenda, we have several items of old business, starting with a public hearing on a particular amendment for the shoreline zoning ordinance. Two issues that have come up before in the past. One dealing with Estes property off of Harpswell Neck Road, and then a submission and application by Andrew Donnelly for a commercial project off of Mountain Road. And one item of new business dealing with an application by Bowdoin College to build a new storage barn on their Schiller Coastal Studies property. And I see that from your, I presume that you're representing Bowdoin. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, let's start with the public hearing item, which deals with an amendment to the shoreline zoning ordinance. If you recall, when this came up initially, it was a proposal to increase the height of structures in specific areas dealing with specific special flood hazard areas along the shore to address, if you will, the threat, the increasing threat from tides and so on and so forth. I don't know, Mr. Planner, if you wish to elaborate.
Yeah, this deals with a change in the state law that was enacted now actually a couple years ago to, in the legislature's wisdom, to address the issue of shoreland zoning regulates the height of replacement structures or additions to structures based upon where they're located with respect to the highest annual tide line and the floodplain management provisions require the elevation of structures above the base flood elevation. And so the result is that you can create on a slope site sort of this, you got to raise the floor level, but you have to keep the height the same so the available space between the floor level and the highest point gets smaller and smaller. The legislature passed a state law to change the way height is measured for non-conforming structures in flood hazard areas when there's a proposal to relocate or reconstruct them. The planning board asked that we discuss that issue with the town's legal counsel as to whether the town had to enforce the state law, whether the town could have more restrictive requirements than the state law, and whether legal counsel thought it was required that those changes be incorporated into the shoreland zoning ordinance. And so, in summary, I gave you the memo, but the town's legal counsel said it's a state law. The town needs to enforce those provisions. That because this was specifically adopted by the legislature as an exception to the shoreland zoning height requirement, that the town could not make that limitation or height measurement more restrictive, and that there's no specific requirement that it be incorporated into the shoreland zoning ordinance. DEP is supposed to review and revise the shoreland zoning guidelines periodically. They are way behind in terms of when they are supposed to have done that. And there appears to be no effort underway to do a review. And so Aga's advice was you don't have to put it in the ordinance, but the town, specifically codes, is charged with enforcing the state law, whether or not it's in the ordinance, and that if the town wanted to pursue putting it in the ordinance, that it would be wise to review the proposed amendments with DEP shoreline zoning staff, since they would ultimately have to sign off on any changes to the town ordinance.
Okay, before I go around the planning board to ask for their comments or questions, does anybody in the public here have anything to say about this particular change in an ordinance dealing with the height, new definition of height in these specific areas of the shoreline? Okay, seeing none, let me open it up to the planning board for questions, comments. Dan?
Yeah, I suppose that I was one of the reasons why we had the legal counsel involved in this. I'm not wild about the idea of the fact that if you have to elevate your base floor by 3 feet, that means that property in the shoreline zoning could be an additional 3 feet higher than it is according to our code. But there's really nothing we can do about it. The one thing that I think, and I think that was part of your recommendation as well, Mark, though, is that when people are looking at what the requirements are, what the limitations are for them to build, the first place they do, of course, is to the ordinances. But there are times in which those ordinances that we've adopted have to be seen in light of what the other state standards are. And so if we're not going to be changing the ordinance in order to specifically adopt those state standards, I think it's incumbent then on codes to let people know when they come in that there are state standards that may be different than those that are put into our ordinance.
Howard?
What, I was looking at the same thing, and in a couple of places in our ordinances, we have what they call a citizen's note. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't just footnote that section of the shoreline zone ordinance.
Interesting.
And
Great idea.
with just a
So-
note that says the state law is more restrictive than this or less restrictive, whatever it is. And we are waiting for the shoreline zone guidelines from the DEP and
To be officially,
before we change to that formulation,
Courtney?
or something like that.
Well, I would put this out to the attorneys in the group. If we have to follow the state guidelines anyway, what's the downside? There must be one. The downside of putting it in our ordinances, which would be easier for applicants because it would all be in one place and there wouldn't have to be a citizen's note or whatever. I mean, the citizen's notes I always take with more of a grain of salt. I probably should not. But if it's an ordinance, it's an ordinance. So I'm asking, is,
I'm
If the
worried,
state
I'm worried that we're gonna have
pulls
to go
back-
back again and do it again.
you think that if the state pulls back, then we'd have to pull back? Is that the
No,
story?
but if their language is different than our language in terms of guidance, when we get the guidance, I mean, I guess we could parrot the ordinance, the state law exactly, but our ordinance is a little different. Mark had to do some fancy footwork to make it work in our ordinance. It's not
Correct.
exactly the same as the state ordinance, and so what I was worried about is that we'd have to go to selectmen and then town meeting again, twice on the same thing that we did the first time. We'd be better waiting.
Amy, Amy?
Yeah, I would just restate that I think it's unfair for somebody, and we've all been to these properties where an old seasonal house gets bought up by somebody that has deep pockets, and they're in the choice spot right there, happens to be in the flood zone, and they put up $1 million property, and they get to raise it 3 feet, while the people behind them who might have been there and are still paying their taxes lose their view. There's something really unjust about that, and I find it really hard to swallow. So I think there are a couple of things we can do. One of them is we could amend the whole ordinance to say somehow that abutters also get to raise their house by 3 feet. But that would start a ripple effect around the whole shorefront area. But that's something that we could do, is if you can raise your house 3 feet, then your neighbors can raise their house 3 feet. The other thing, if we don't do that, is I would like to suggest that the chair draft a letter to the select board explaining why we think this is unfair, and ask the select board to, if they agree, to contact our state legislative representative to express our position, and ask that they reconsider this law for the reasons that we express. Because I think it's just not fair. And I think we don't have to sit here as a local planning board and just take it. We can use the legislative process, and I think we should do that. I would recommend that we do that, and if you folks agree, then I'm happy to make a motion, but if you don't, then, you know.
Well, my understanding, Mark, is that the way you laid things out, it's basically a done deal at this point.
Well, I mean, it's the legislature adopted the law. The town's legal counsel has said that notwithstanding whether the language of the state law is incorporated into the ordinance or not, the town has to abide by the state law. If the town wants to encourage the legislators who represent the town in the House and the Senate to revisit that change, I think the town has in other situations done that. And I mean, that's between, I guess, if you will, between you and the select board
Yeah.
as to whether they want to, get involved in that discussion.
Well, the other thing is that we don't want to put codes in a position where they are approving certain height parameters, if you will, for one person and not able to do it for another person. I mean,
Yeah.
there needs to be, I would hate to have the code enforcement people put in a position where we're dealing kind of with two different types of
Yeah.
applicants and so on.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, I think that the sort of situation that arises, and that those of you who may have been on the site walk out at,
Intervale?
On Wars. The one on Wars?
no,
Which one?
out on the,
On
remember the
Intervale?
one where the plan was incorrect in terms of the setback and whatever?
Yes.
And the applicant is saying, well, how come I can't build as high
Yep.
as my
Right.
neighbor across the street
Right.
was allowed to build 2 years ago? And the answer is because the ordinance changed.
Is that Lobster Lane?
No.
No.
Margaret, help me.
It's off of one.
Potts Point, the one all the way down at the end of Potts Point. And so it's this thing of, now I'm here and I did something 2 years ago and I was limited to this, but now my neighbor comes along and comes into the town and the town says, oh, we have to follow the state law, not the town ordinance, and you can build 8 feet or 3 feet higher than your neighbor could. That's where we get this sort of, I would call it, seeds of distrust in the process.
Exactly, and that's why I'm suggesting, just for the purpose of our own integrity, that we at least write a letter and put on record that we recognize that this is an issue and that we'd like to move it through to the people that actually voted on it through our representative and just register it. Otherwise, they'll never know.
Yeah, I like that idea, and I'll get back to that in just a second. I want to address the thing that Howard and Courtney were talking about. I like the idea of the citizens note, simply because you never know when the state's going to change the laws again. And for us to continually have to try to keep up with that, it's much easier to say, there may be other state regulations we can put in a citizens note without having to go through the entire process. So I like that. As to, so that's kind of where I came down on that one.
Yeah, as long as it's clear
Yeah,
for the people, the applicant, I mean, that's,
Yeah.
and not to put codes in a tough spot.
and
I don't want them to be, the whipping boy and girl.
Okay, Mr. Planner, what would you recommend at this point as a
I
court?
don't think, were you finished, Dan?
I was just going to support what you were saying.
Oh, okay.
About making a recommendation to the select board so that people of Harpswell know that this is something that we recognize as an issue, but our hands were tied.
Yeah.
It seems to me that the idea of including a citizen's note in that section about the height of non-conforming structures could be added to the ordinance. The citizens' notes are not part of the ordinance and don't have to go through the process, although I think the select board would need to be involved in that. And that would at least potentially provide notice to people. If the board thinks that we should wait until the shoreland zoning guidelines are updated, I don't have a problem with that. I'm not a fan of doing that because I think it creates the potential for confusion. For instance, a number of years ago, the shoreland zoning law was amended to require pre-construction and post-construction pictures be submitted. I would guess that in the majority of communities, that doesn't happen because that hasn't been incorporated into the guidelines yet. But when that happens, then there's it creates liabilities for the community. if something's done and there's not the evidence that's supposed to be there. So I guess I'm a proponent of amending the ordinance and keeping it up to date with the state law, but I think this is going to apply in a limited number of situations. And so I think doing a note and, sending a letter or encouraging the select board to intervene in the legislative process is fine. I mean, I do think that it's important to understand that the interaction of the shoreline zoning height restriction for non-conforming structures, for the replacement or relocation of non-conforming structures, and the interaction of the requirement to elevate the new structures or substantial improvement of existing structures can create, I would call it an untenable situation for the property owner who wants to do improvements. I would say professionally, I am not in favor of creating opportunities for substantial investment in properties in flood areas and go into the house on stilts model.
All right. Any other comments? Should we,
So what is the,
I guess,
what's the answer here? Are we going
Well,
with Howard's idea of the citizens'
if you give
note?
me a motion that we can vote on, we'll vote.
Well, I can't make a motion, but I heard three parts. One, that the planning board recommends that the town not incorporate the language of the state law into the shoreline zoning ordinance at this point in time, but instead add a citizen's note indicating that the way height is measured for the reconstruction or relocation of non-conforming structures in special flood hazard areas is subject to different rules incorporated in state law with a section reference. And that second, that the planning board asks to discuss with the select board the idea of encouraging the representatives, legislative representatives, to look at reopening this question because of the concerns of the town.
About
and
fairness.
allowing higher structures in the shoreland area.
Right.
All right.
That's quite a motion.
Two votes.
But we probably should do that in two motions.
Okay,
Okay.
I move that we not incorporate the state language in our ordinance at this time, but that we create a citizen's note that calls attention to the state language and makes recommendations as appropriate to explain that the new state requirements are in place. Whatever that language needs to be is what it should be.
I'll second that.
Further
Even though you
discussion?
didn't ask me.
Further discussion? All in favor? Okay. Opposed? So we have.
were you opposed, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I am.
Okay,
4-1. I think, for what it's worth, I think we ought to just change the ordinance at this point. That's my perspective, because I think we're bucking the inevitability of what's going to happen. But
But
It's the language, isn't it?
Mr. Chairman, at the same point, as the planner has told us, we have not gotten the guidance yet.
Right.
And at the time that we get the guidance and we have clarity, that's an appropriate time to put
Okay.
the change into it.
Well, the motion as stated has been passed,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
at this point, my comments become rather moot. So, okay,
I would make a second motion.
all right.
Given that the DEP has not yet put this, this provision into,
The guidance,
into what?
it's the guidance,
Oh,
shoreline zoning guidelines.
Into the shoreline zoning guidelines. Thank you, Howard. I move that we take this opportunity to ask to meet with the select board to express our concerns, either in writing or through a meeting, and ask them if they agree, if they would move this through the legislative channels, through our state rep, to DEP, so that we can register this particular problem that is only comes up in shoreline communities, and make them aware that it may raise issues that they're unaware of.
Okay, fair enough. Is there a second for that motion? Okay, any further discussion? All in favor? I will certainly support that.
No,
Opposed?
opposed.
Okay. Okay, so 4-1, again. All right, so I think we have sort of a path forward, and let's move on. The next item is, has to do with a property off of Harpswell Neck Road. It's called the Estes Property LLC owner. And if you recall, the last time we discussed this, the change of use for this particular property was approved by the planning board. And one of the things that was required, or was asked for, was a landscaping plan, so that we could better understand how that property will be maintained under the, I guess, the environment that it currently exists in, which is right on the shore in a relatively small confined area. So at this point, let me invite the legal representative for the owner, the applicant, to comment.
Right, so I'm David Goldman, as I think everyone knows at this point. I've been to a number of these meetings and 2 of the site visits, and I feel like especially at the most recent one, I really got a good sense of some of the real valid, real-world concerns that everyone has about kind of the effect that global warming and rising tides and all that is going to have in the area, and that's, we talked about that at some length, and I agree, that's obviously an issue, but so that's a concern in a real-world sense. But what we have here today is kind of 2 very circumscribed questions that we're addressing, at least for the moment. And one has to do with the landscaping plan and, following the instruction that we go out and get landscaping plans done. We asked a number of different licensed landscape architects to submit something that would hopefully comply with what you were looking for. And we got these 2 back. I submitted both of them, not to kind of necessarily, we'd go with either one of them. I'm making this microphone blow up. We'd go with either one of them. It's fine, but it sort of seemed like the Davis one was maybe more preferable, and we're happy to go with that. We're happy to make, modifications within the context of what Davis has suggested and tell them to do this specific thing or that specific thing. I think the landscape plan, there's only so much you can do to account for the possibility that, we get a 100-year storm or something, or 2 in a row, whatever. Things that used to be 100-year storms might not be 100-year storms anymore. There's only so much you can do to account for water coming up over the entire property. But we're happy to do whatever we can with respect to landscaping to address that. So I guess that's the first question, is with respect to whether something along the lines of, I think, specifically what Davis has proposed is acceptable. I guess and we might be.
And you've seen the comments from
Yes.
Conservation Commission?
And that's why I'm saying it sort of seemed like the Davis one was preferable from that perspective. And I saw there were additional comments, I'm not a landscape architect. This is a new concept to me, seeing what is acceptable, what's not. I defer to people who know what they're talking about in that respect, and I'm happy to incorporate it into whatever the final landscape plan is. I don't think that's kind of a problem.
Go ahead.
It looked like the plan, as the Conservation Commission had submitted, was sent also to Mr. Crooker. Correct?
Right.
Yeah, I was looking at this. Would there be any objection, so far as you know, to taking the different plantings into account? It sounds like, I would love to say that property would never
Right.
become an island again. We would all like that not to happen, but I suspect it probably will happen. If there is a way to have something that will survive being submerged, and grasses that would survive, and that all of a sudden it's not a big erosion issue, that would be highly preferable. So I would love to see the plants that were suggested by the people who have that in mind, so that this can be a good thing in the future. We would like, not just for next year when the piece is sold, but going forward, to have something that would work.
Right, there's certainly nothing kind of, I guess, prescriptive coming from me as to what should be in the landscape plan, and as far as I know, Mr. Crooker is open to whatever, in terms of the specific composition of the plantings. I have kind of I don't know whether it'll work, but I have a suggestion as to how how we can make this make sense in a way that's flexible, that I think plays into the second issue, which is is the planning board going to maintain jurisdiction or defer to the codes? I guess my global suggestion is that you should defer to code with an instruction that, something along the lines of what's suggested in that approach be incorporated into the final landscape plan. And then the primary reason why I think it makes sense to defer to codes is just allows more flexible we can talk back and forth and say, well, what about this plan, what about that plan, as opposed to waiting a month and then coming here, and then we're all talking about it here, and then I go back, and then I come back another month, I just think it's a more flexible approach, but certainly we're open to incorporating whatever specific plant mix makes sense.
Does the public have anything to say about this particular application? Okay. I like what you said. I think it makes a lot of sense. And as long as you understand the input from the Conservation Commission, which we certainly rely on and respect their certain opinions and input, if the applicant is willing to work in that direction. Let me move on to the nuts and bolts, the bottom line here. And that is whether the board should take jurisdiction of this. In light of our previous discussions, in light of our visits to the site and the decisions that we've made before, and in light of the fact that you have submitted with due diligence the plan, landscaping plan, recognizing the comments of the Conservation Commission, I move the planning board should decline to take jurisdiction of the review of the project under section 10.3.2.4 of the shoreline zoning ordinance, and that we remand the application to code enforcement with the condition that if the proposed changes significantly are altered, that the application be brought back to the board for jurisdictional consideration. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion?
I have a question.
Sure.
I was out there, as many of us were, when the storm happened, and I don't think anything would survive what happened. And, I'm with Courtney, I hope it doesn't happen again, but, that and $5 will buy you a cup of coffee.
Not anymore.
Not anymore, I know. My question was about the septic system, and it must have been inundated. And so it's not pertinent to your motion.
Right.
So I'm happy to not ask it, but I just want to express a curiosity about, like, what the heck happens to that septic system? Anyway,
I
that's
think
all I.
that's
That's
got-
what something the
obviously
codes
something
would be
codes
looking at
absolutely-
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
Anything else?
Go ahead.
In a typical case, I'd be really, wouldn't even think twice about sending this to codes. But considering the nature of this property and the issues that we've had, which are, none of them are the fault of the property owner, but they're the fault of what's going on. And the number of people from the community who have written about it in a number of forums. I just don't want this to get lost. And that at some point or another, people come back and say, well, why didn't the planning board keep an eye on this? So, ultimately, my initial inclination is to send it to codes, but it's with some severe reservations.
Okay. Anything else?
My problem is the decision that codes has to make with respect to the greatest practical extent with respect to the sideline, the setbacks, is difficult until you know how exactly the property would be used. And so if I were trying to make that decision, it would be a lot easier to make that decision if I knew that I said this at the sidewalk, that the first floor was not going to be habitable space, but that the living space, if you will. It could be storage, it could be lots of different things. Part of it's going to be garage. But if the habitable space was on the second floor, away from the potential damage of another or worse storm, I would be much more comfortable being able to say, yeah, they've done the best job they can. Because otherwise, I might say, the footprint should be smaller, and maybe you go up and put another, within the new height limitations
Yeah, right.
that we have to live with, because that would make more sense. And then we had a discussion about the whole concept of what FEMA might require in the floodplain for reconstruction of this, at what point and how much 50% of value or more, and how you determine value. It would be a nightmare. You could make the argument that if there was some, that the public has an interest in that issue of rebuilding in a clear floodplain, not hypothetical. The water was flowing right all across that road. And so I think that that's something that maybe we should think about retaining if that issue, I think the owner could help us with that decision by making the statement that they would consider that. But if not, then I don't know. I think it's an issue.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
the issue of the floodplain development is controlled by the floodplain management ordinance that controls what you can and cannot do. When the new flood insurance rate maps are hopefully adopted by town meeting, that will change both the kind of floodplain, it will put it in a velocity zone, and it will change, I think, Margaret, the base flood elevation a little bit there. And so there is an ordinance in place that is, if you will, dictated to the town by the state, that if the town wants to be a participant in the federal flood insurance program, including the ability of property owners to buy subsidized flood insurance, we have to live by. And so codes deals with that all the time in terms of what people can and can't do and what they have to do with respect to development within the floodplains. And so it's not a negotiated kind of arrangement. It's, this is what you have to do. And so that's there. Secondly, the state law height amendment actually changes nothing here, because this is one of those situations where the sill, which the state law now says you measure from in terms of the height, versus the grade adjacent to the building is essentially, there's no change. So you can't do it, and so you're limited to the existing building height, you can't go up. And so, in a way, I'm gonna sort of echo what the applicant's attorney said, is there's a whole bunch of rules here that interplay, and professionally, I think codes is better able to deal with those than to educate you about what the floodplain requirements are and what the new flood standards will be and how those interact with the use of the property, et cetera.
But I am with Howard. I agree with you that the place is going to flood.
Well.
And I, it looks like it could be a boathouse, perhaps, underneath part. But I mean, this is, I know we have the ordinances and the regulations. This is kind of a common sense thing.
Well, we can't,
I have to speak.
Yeah,
That's-
okay.
That's what I'm just
Okay.
wanting to say, that I support Howard in his feelings about this, and I wish there were something that we could do to follow common sense. I understand we cannot, but
okay, noted.
Yeah, one quick thing, I think the force of the market is going to be no small thing here.
Exactly.
And anyone who's gonna spend the money to buy that building is going to have fairly deep pockets and is not going to be unwise about what they do. And,
Buy a lot of insurance.
yeah, so, I
Probably
would,
won't be able to buy a lot of insurance.
yeah, probably not.
Okay, well, we have a motion before the board to remand this to codes. And if discussion is complete, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? All right?
Mr. Chairman, was there a condition on that remand relative to what the
Yes.
codes is supposed to pay attention to?
landscaping?
Well, not
I
on
thought
landscape.
you said that, but
If the proposal changes significantly, that the application will be brought forward to the board for jurisdictional reconsideration.
thank you.
And we ask codes to take into consideration the report of the comments made by by conservation
Yep.
folks.
Okay, with that understanding, does anybody wish to change their vote? Okay, so it passes 5-0 unanimously. It's for remanded to codes. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for your time.
All right, I'm going to throw a curve at this point. I'd like to change the order of discussion, because I think that Mr. Donnelly's application might take a little bit more discussion than the Bowdoin College application. And so I would like to go to Bowdoin College. Their application is to build a storage facility on their property in Schiller, the Schiller Coastal Center. And if you would like to just briefly outline what your plan is?
Yeah, good evening. My name's Eric Douglas. I'm a construction project manager in facilities at Bowdoin. I have two colleagues with me here tonight. Holly Parker is the director of Schiller Coastal Studies. She's new, been about 18 months in the role. And we have Catherine Ferdinand, who's our land use specialist. I guess the project is a amendment to our approved site plan that was done in 2020, I believe, or approved in 2019 for the new campus out there.
Right.
The facility we'd like to build is a 4-bay segmented, 2 bays segmented from 2 others. I know there's concerns about adding another structure out there, increasing traffic on Bayview Road. We feel that this will actually, in some ways, reduce traffic. We have a generator stored at our warehouse now that will be housed out there, that every time we have a power outage, that gets trucked out there. Tables and chairs for catering events gets trucked out to Schiller. With the storage facility, those will already be on site, and our big white trucks won't have to bring them out there. So the garage is, proposed is 48 by 24. We'd like it to mimic exactly what the cabins look like out there. So the siding is a hardy plank, board and batten siding, painted exactly the same color as the cabins, down to the roof pitch being exactly the same as the cabin, which is a 12/6 pitch. Estimated height is about 17 feet to the peak of the roof, with a square footage of 1152, I believe, with a net of 700, because we're taking away a garage that's out there. It's about 300 square feet.
Okay.
I do need to apologize that I did not make the site walk. We had a snafu with.
Well, actually,
We were early.
Oh, was
And
that?
they all left,
Yeah.
and left Margaret and me there.
I would have loved to meet you all out there
Yeah.
and answer any questions.
Well, if you guarantee Bowdoin wins in
They didn't show, we were early.
basketball and
So
hockey
they all
this coming
said,
week,
"We're
we'll
leaving."
forgive you. How's that?
We did beat Colby, so yeah.
Hockey is the best ticket in town. It's free.
It was free.
Okay, so this site plan was initially approved in March 2019. And thanks to the planner, there are actually 21 different requirements, if you will, that were called out and approved at that time. None of those requirements are impacted by this. We're looking specifically at this particular structure. Does anybody on the board have any questions at this point in time? Any discussion from the public? Okay, with those things in mind, in light of the findings of fact, with consideration given to supporting documentation in the record, I move the planning board approves the application of Bowdoin College to amend the previously approved site plan to construct a 24-foot by 48-foot 4-bay storage garage at the Schiller Coastal Studies campus. Planning board finds that the applicant, Bowdoin College, has met the standards of the Town of Harpswell Site Plan Review Ordinance. This approval is not final until such time as final plans showing all conditions of approval and any waivers granted have been signed by the chair of the planning board. This approval is based on the approved plans and on all submissions and information provided by the applicant at final approval, whether referenced in any findings or conditions of approval. Next, this approval is dependent upon and limited to the proposal and plans that are contained in the application and supporting documents submitted and affirmed to by the applicant. Any variation from the plan, proposals, and supporting documents, except de minimis changes as determined by the town planner that do not affect approval standards, is subject to review and approval by the planning board prior to implementation. Next, the applicant shall obtain all necessary state and federal approvals before the applicant commences any land use activities pursuant to the site plan approval and shall comply with the requirements of those permits and approvals. And finally, all work shall be completed in accordance with best management practices for soil erosion and sedimentation control and with low-impact development best management practices for stormwater management. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
I would like to suggest that, actually, I'll wait afterwards, I'll wait. 'Cause
Okay.
It's not relevant to this
All
application.
right, call for a vote. All in favor?
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
I was wondering if, at some point in our empty schedule, we might have a workshop so that the planning board can hear what best management practices are. And we can really go over and remind ourselves about what those best management and LID practices really are, so that when we say that, we have in our mind a very clear idea of what it is that we're working on.
Well, thank you.
Good suggestion.
Great idea.
Good suggestion. Yeah. All right, good luck.
See you over there.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. We have our final item tonight, is an application by Mr. Donnelly, Andrew Donnelly, for a proposed mixed-use development on the southwest corner of Harpswell Islands Road, Route 24, and Mountain Road. Most of us have been to the site at least once, a couple of times anyway, and he has submitted a number of different pieces of information, and we're here to try to clarify a number of things. If you would like to start
I
by,
have an addendum to that for.
Addendum? are these, is this,
Just to clarify, like you were saying, yeah,
Okay.
what I'm going to do on the first phase to start out.
Oh, sorry.
okay. When we got the package, your package submitted, it was, you know, a well done, very professionally done, but it was a very complicated package. It looked like there were multiple structures on the information that we had, and it was difficult to try to comprehend and understand exactly
Where I want to
what
start.
we wanted to deal with here in this particular initial phase.
Yep, that's why I made that for you guys,
Okay,
to really kind of clarify, you know, what is phase one, what I'm calling the minimal viable product. What, like starting a fire, this is the kindling and the start, and what I can do financially just to get this up started.
okay, since we've just kind of laid eyes on this, we're talking about essentially, the initial thing is a 28 by 24, 672 square foot, call it a maker retail structure.
These are, yeah, I'm basing off of what I have gotten approval for in the DOT driveway permit for square footage that we have listed at roughly 2,100 square feet, and I'm kind of, in this schematic, I'm breaking it apart where it would go, starting with these basic, simple, not complicated kind of buildings.
So phase one is the maker retail structure plus the additional retail structure.
I'd like to have two separate structures to start out. I mean, I'll start with building one, but, you know, I'd like to get approval to do, you know, both of them. One of them I will be doing myself, will be my maker space, but I think it'd be nice to have, to start out with another building where I can invite another entrepreneur to have a different kind of service, like hopefully maybe a store. Very small within the parameters of the DOT 99 trips per day.
Okay.
So those are both then part phase one,
Yeah,
correct, Mr. Donnelly?
yeah.
But you have a clear vision of where the other things will go for your different phases?
Yes, and you could see in the packet I put together, I have the all the buildings in the Phase 3, and you can you see it as a kind of a radial, works
Yeah.
really off of the layout of the roundabout, fairly organized, step back to break up the facade, so it's not a big blocky, it has some, visual integrity, intrigue to it. There is an inclined slope. The first phase would all be one level, single floor. The subsequent phase may have a split level, so it may have two levels in some areas as it goes up the slope. The plumbing and rooms that have like a bathroom and so forth be towards the back on the ridge, closer to the septic area. So it's not complicated with pumps and so forth for drainage.
This bathroom, it's not a porta potty, it's a real,
That's going to be the start, yeah, what's drawn on there, it's detached because it's on top of the hill. And that would be the plan, to start with the bathroom, up, just a small one up there.
But that's
Okay.
also part of Phase 1, correct?
phase one?
Yes, yeah.
Good.
Why is
Okay.
the bathroom not attached to the maker retail space?
It was just because where I want to start the front of the maker space, just behind the parking, and where I want to put the bathroom is elevated about 5 feet. And so, to start out, I'm not going to fill in all that space with building, it'll grow. It's like a reef, there'll be, the space will grow to reach where the bathroom is in subsequent stages. You can see on one of those pages of with the colored blocks, you can see the footprint of how that expands back.
Does anybody live in this development in Phase 1?
Yeah, we're gonna open it up to, you here to comment as abutters? Okay, we'll give you an opportunity to speak in a minute, for sure, okay?
No.
No.
A couple of things that I want to ask you. There's nothing in here about erosion control during this project. And you're going to need to do that to get this thing approved, number one. And when you're looking at a mixed-use property like this, there needs to be some sort of an indication of how pedestrians are gonna move around the property, because, even though this is phase one, what you wanna do ultimately is a little bit more complex, and so we need to understand how,
And I've added a note on there. It's basically walking surface on the crushed
Crushed,
gravel.
okay.
At level to the drive.
Okay, before I open it up to questions from by the board, I would like to invite, at this point, anyone from the public who wishes to speak to this particular project. If you'd come to the podium and identify yourselves.
Did you gentlemen both sign in?
I do not.
Okay.
I can sign in.
Well,
That'd be
do
great.
it on the way out, that's
Okay.
good.
Hello, I'm Zeb.
Zeb,
Nice to meet you, Andrew. Zeb Rasman. I live, I'm in a butter right over on Lucky Lane.
mhm.
My largest concern, I think I voiced it in the Zoom meeting last year, is just that we're all on shallow wells over there. I see the size of this going in, and I have concerns as to how that affects us. I know Mike is the same situation, we're all just downhill from the proposed property. And that was the largest piece that I was concerned about there, that I'm just,
Now, Lucky Lane is the road that goes up off of Route 24, or is that,
Yes.
okay.
yeah.
So your properties are off Route 24, but up sort of behind where we're talking about here,
Yes,
okay? Because there are other properties right on 24 that directly abut this particular property too.
yes.
Okay.
But Those aren't specifically on like Lucky Lane, those are just
Okay, yeah,
at the corner
right.
lot there.
Okay. Okay, so you're concerned about the potential impact on your wells?
We're all on the
I think
same
yours is
aquifer there.
different from that.
I'm
And different
not
from
sure
this.
how deep
I know.
Mike's well is, but ours is about a 40-foot well. I know it's fairly shallow as they go.
So you have a dug well?
No, it's a drilled well.
Drilled
but
well,
it's,
okay.
It's not a deep well.
Okay.
Very shallow.
Yeah.
Sir, do you have anything you'd like to add to Zeb's comments? Come up, if you'd come up and just identify yourself, please.
So I'm Mike Murphy, my wife Denise and I live at 8 Lucky Lane, so nice to meet you, Andrew. I'm directly adjacent to everything that's being proposed. I'd be looking right at it.
I think you have to speak into the mic. I think they're coming to tell you.
Just come a little bit closer to the mic.
Yes, thank you.
So, yeah, right next door to Zeb, but I'm literally adjacent to everything that's proposed. I mean, just the aquifer, our current wells, that mine is pretty shallow, Bill's well is also, blasting, sewage runoff, I just worry. I spent 24 years in the military. I've worked the last 20 years in a job helping folks with disabilities. I'm now, this little patch that Zeb and I have is so quiet, and it just, so much is proposed that I guess my concerns are not knowing what this is really going to look like. I've read the proposal, and I've read just tonight additional things that are in there, and it's hard for me to conceptualize what's going to be in my backyard where I love Harpswell, picked this place to retire. It's quiet, my grandkids visit, they'll be in my backyard as they are now, running around, and I don't know what's going to be there. I'm just generally concerned about that. So I guess that would be my input.
Okay. Anything else?
No, thank you.
Appreciate your comments. Questions by the board? Howard?
Just to start off, I think it's impossible to receive a different site plan at the meeting for which we are supposed to review the application. Not only have we not had a chance to study it in any kind of detail, the planner hasn't reviewed it in any detail, but the public has no shot at this, because it's not a public document until it's not on our website or whatever. I mean, normally there has to be a deadline for submissions that would be considered at a meeting. I don't know how Mark feels about that, but, I mean, I can look at it, but I don't think I'm going to have any different reaction to it than the plan that's written on the site plan, the old survey that we had, or as described in the submission,
It's on
because they're all different.
page 14. It's on page 14 of the proposal.
14. Under the placemaking?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Other comments from the board?
Still looking for page 14. Oh, there it is.
And I had taken to heart the comments that the folks on Lucky Lane had mentioned regarding their well, and as promised in the last meeting, I said I'd put my well as far away from them as I could, and that's what I did. And it's right there, very close to where the buildings are proposed to be. It's pretty compact, the overall design. I believe I have a very compact and a considerate approach to what I'm looking to do. I don't even have there's no lawn of any sort. I don't have a lawn where I live now, and I don't really believe in having lawns. And so all the trees that are in between where the driveway is and these buildings and Lucky Lane, I just assume leave it all trees. That's the way I like it, and I agree with them 100% about leaving it like that. And you know, we're all here on an island that's made out of rock, and everything is a commodity, even the rainfall. I've made extensive notes about how I'm going to manage it and salvage it, and even collect it for you folks. If you need some in the middle of in the summer, I'm going to have cisterns of rainwater runoff. Beyond that, I'm considering to engineer a system where I can use rain runoff for my plumbing and flushes, toilet flushes. It's going to take a little bit of engineering to do that, but I'm interested in approaching that. And I also have specified how the riprap, it has a volume that will receive some of the runoff, and the remainder I have specified to be collected and diverted into the existing pond.
Other questions from the board?
I would just like to say that I appreciate your vision, Mr. Donnelly. It's nice to see someone who thinks creatively and appears to be willing to work with neighbors, which is so important
Sure.
in a community like ours. I still have a concern about where your driveway is. You know, I drive down Mountain Road a lot. It seems like I spend most of my time here. But is there any way to angle the driveway so it's a little further away from the stop sign? And can you have an exit onto 24? I'm just saying, I know that's probably,
I'm more than happy to do that,
Yeah,
if you guys approve it.
I'm trying to figure out,
It'll also help with emergency.
well, I'm concerned about possible congestion. I think DOT said it was fine with the number of trips. I'm just trying to visualize people coming to the stop sign, people trying to turn in, people coming out.
I could, yeah, that's a good idea. And I'm more happy to solve that, and even put in an addition, on that handout, in regards to what I saw today about the emergency vehicle, I've added a potential backup turnaround right there at the entrance, where that's the quickest way, for an emergency vehicle to even turn around if they needed to turn around and went the wrong way on the Harpswell Road. It's not a lot of places where a vehicle can turn around in Harpswell,
It's true.
And that could be something that's available for the town to use to just to turn around for this property and maybe anything else.
I'm wondering how the two gentlemen over there, how do you get to 24 or Mountain Road? Is it like a driveway, or do you use Lucky Lane, or?
Lucky Lane to 24, and then you
I
make
keep
Thomas
trying
Immediate
to
left-hand
find a
turn.
sign. Is there a sign for Lucky Lane?
There is.
Yeah,
There's
there
a lot
is.
of vegetation going around it,
for it.
but it's there, and as I've said, we come down.
It's like, what, 100 feet from, or something like that, from
Yeah,
Mountain
yes,
Road,
sir. That's-
basically.
Might as well be a driveway.
Yeah.
It's like a driveway, literally a driveway that
Yeah.
leads 24, take your left, then the left on Mountain.
Well, you can see
I
the,
saw it.
you
I
can see
saw
the
it on
footage. I mean,
on the
it's-
plan when I
fairly
went
long way
to look
away.
at it today. I saw Lucky Lane, and I wondered whether you could go out Lucky Lane, but I know it's your private road. I'm just trying to figure out how the traffic could be more usable. Not that I'm trying to send more cars your way, of course.
Okay.
Mr.
Yes.
Chairman, I have a question about the DOT. Did they look at what you have proposed for everything? Or did they just see the phase one?
I showed them all, and I showed them I wanted to start with phase one.
Okay,
And the DOT permit is limited to a maximum of 99 one-way peak hour trips based upon 1,700 square feet of maker/retail space and 300 square feet of the takeout. Anything beyond that will potentially require what the state calls a traffic movement permit, which is a full traffic study to assess the ability of the intersection with the road to accommodate those trips safely. There is I'm going to call it sort of a dogleg that goes out onto Route 24.
Yeah. I saw it.
But using that would require a second
Right.
state permit
Yep.
and would require significant, I guess you'd call it alteration of the site, going all the way back over to the loop through here, which would, and I'm going to sort of speak for Andrew a little, to me, what I read in here is that the development is concentrated over near Mountain Road.
Right.
That the majority, the vast majority of the site, especially those areas adjacent to both the existing properties on 24 and the properties off of Lucky Lane are, if you will, buffered
Yeah.
from what's going on.
I do see that.
And so saying, well, then let's provide an access out onto 24 completely changes how the site gets utilized. And I'm going to say realistically, my guess is that Maine DOT will not be very enamored with the idea of creating a new driveway out onto 24. Lucky Lane gentleman back there, what's it like getting out of the end of Lucky Lane at
It's so scary.
4 o'clock at night?
It's scary all the time because. what
It's
happens-
scary, why is it
This
scary?
is why it's scary. Because I'm.
Go to the
there-
go to the microphone,
Yes,
please.
sir. So we come to the end of our road, and one looks to the left, and you can't see the top of the hill, you can't see what's coming.
Right.
And then one looks this way, and people are coming up. And what happens is, literally, every time I pull out with my lovely grandchildren in the back of my car, is I look this way, there's nobody, I look this way, there's nobody.
Yeah.
I look this way, I gotta pull out, and somebody flies past.
And
Or down,
and they're going like 25 miles an hour by the,
times 3. They're going very fast, and it appears so much faster when you don't know they're there until you pull out. And then if you add winter with, all what happens with it's very scary pulling out both ways.
I withdraw my suggestion.
May I follow up with that? Okay. I see what you've been saying, Mark. I guess the reason why I asked the question is, okay, so DOT says, we're looking at this, traffic's fine, but what I'm concerned with is that we hit phase 2 or phase 3, and now DOT says, I can't do that. So in terms of fairness to you, I want to make sure that whatever kind of approvals you're getting for traffic from DOT is not going to limit your entire project to just this phase. You see what I mean?
Okay.
I don't know
I
if you,
mean,
That's his
that
business.
possibility exists.
Yeah.
yeah.
But it's
Okay.
good. I
It's neat. I don't know if
I
it's-
think
But if you're
thinking of
thinking-
the wholeness of the plan, that's why I asked whether you had everything, so that We didn't say, do that, you go, oh, great, and then 5 years later, you said, I want to do that, oh, but you shot yourself in the foot by
Right,
doing something.
that's why
Yeah.
I'm laying it out in
Right.
the grander vision. And keeping it compact, it's not gonna be, you can see the taste, I have a little bit of a perspective bird's eye. It kind of shows you how it radiates, and it all works off of the cul-de-sac that's already there. And it's, the idea is to make it a quaint kind of seaside town, maybe a little boutique next to a shop, next to my little maker studio where I make interesting things. Maybe canoes, maybe, I have a skiff design I'm working on. Pretty amazing. Yeah, it could be a fishing boat or a racing boat, sailboat.
Go ahead.
Before we get into the submission requirements, I just wanted to ask one thing. The narrative that we have about the driveway permit, the MDOT driveway permit says a certain number of square feet of workshop living space. I've already asked about the living aspect of it, and that
Yeah.
it said
well, I'm-
no, but.
I'm sorry. I
the-
meant to break.
The next question was,
The last phase, yeah.
well, it says, and then it says a 300 square foot coffee stand with, and then it goes into the peak, the 99 limit. This shows, this most recent one shows, because we don't have square footages on these buildings, but on this one, it shows 672 square feet in a maker's building, and then 864 feet in a retail building, which is the coffee shop.
This one.
In the center of the
Yeah.
circle.
Yeah, the drive-through would be.
The
so you-
drive-through is in the circle,
Yeah,
so this doesn't show that, or
It kind of does.
I don't know what those,
It's hard to.
Those arrow-shaped buildings
yeah.
That's right.
are the coffee shop, and if you look to the right, it says drive-through 10 by 30, 300
Okay, so then this retail building, which is part of Phase 1, is not part of that, the MDOT permit as it stands today.
Well, they've given a permit for up to 99 peak hour trips. Whether they considered the full retail or not, I can't speak to.
they said
I don't know what
2100.
was shown to them.
What about the return trip? I don't know.
2,100
It's
square
only
foot
a
is what they
one-way trip.
permitted.
Well, that means if you go in and out, it's two
This says
trips.
17,
Okay.
17
Plus the three.
Poorly
plus
stated.
3 is 2,000.
I don't know.
Okay.
Should be 45
2,100.
round trips.
But how many have you said right here? 672 plus 864. That's not 2,000.
Common
But
sense
doesn't-
lacking in
1550.
legal language.
Plus
You
the
get the
bathroom,
bathroom, 96.
Plus the bathroom.
350, 1650.
All right.
I have a question,
Go ahead.
please. Okay, I could be wrong on my calculations here. I have a couple of questions, but I would like to propose. The planner, Mark, has done a really good job, I think, of going through and raising issues. I think we should go through each one of them. But before we do that, I just want to say some concerns that I have. The coffee shop, I am concerned about the coffee shop and having it be too successful in terms of people coming in and getting coffee and then egressing the property. Because from what I can just roughly calculate, there's room for maybe 3 cars to stack up before you have to get off onto Mountain Road. And,
Well, we had
And, just-
5 cars there the other day, 6.
yep.
Yeah, but we were all in a one-lane circle.
Yeah, I just think if your coffee shop is working really well, you've only got 3 spots to line up to turn onto Mountain Road. And Mountain Road, the exit from that property, you're gonna have people crossing a lane of traffic to go turn left, or maybe exiting to turn right. And from 24, you're gonna have people turning left, coming into that traffic, and I just, 99 trips, one-way trips equals almost 200 two-way trips.
No,
Right.
no, no,
No.
no,
Is
no.
that not right?
45
Okay.
99 one-way trips
It's
is
45.
50 in and outs.
Okay, well, why do they call it one-way?
Because when people say trip, they assume that a trip is in and out. The traffic people count trips as in is one trip, out is a second trip.
So there's 99 one-way trips in and another 99
No,
one-way
no,
trips out?
total 99 trips.
Okay, I don't quite get that, but that's.
50 round trips.
That's okay.
It's 50 in
I don't know how you can have
round
99
trips.
If you like that, you ought to read the
two-way
IDE
trips. Can't
standard.
Yeah.
divide 99 by
I-
2,
Okay, so that's basically
you know?
one car per minute exiting and entering, right?
During the peak
For
hour.
a
During the
peak
peak
hour.
hours, one car per minute, okay. My other question, I just want to make sure we're on the same page with that. My other question is, looking at the subsurface wastewater disposal system, it looks like you've got a septic tank that's going to have automobiles traveling over it. And you've got two septic tanks, 2,000 gallon septic tanks that look like.
Not entirely over it, no, just to the side. There's a ridge. The,
So I'm looking at your property, so I would suggest.
Yeah.
Just for, that you put this map on this map, that you overlay it, so we can see where the septic system is with regard to the gravel area.
It's on there.
Okay, it's on, well, I look for it, I should look more carefully then.
Amy,
It's a-
if you look at what Andrew gave you tonight, the 8.5 by 11 sheet,
Uh-huh,
and it's the same on the large plan, you will see a little rectangle labeled bathroom.
yeah,
Out of the bathroom, you will see a line going to another rectangle and a
Yep.
long skinny rectangle. That's the discharge to the septic tank, I believe.
that's correct.
And then the leach field
Is
has a
off.
long, thin leach field.
okay, I get that, I see that. I'm just looking at the septic tank that's near the coffee place. There's no property.
Oh, the,
Property line on this site plan.
I mentioned that the Jerry, it's a pretty abstract, he engineered, I mentioned it to him, he said, this is fine. I mentioned exactly what you said, and he
Yeah.
said, this depicts what we need to do. I said,
Okay.
okay, I said, I'm not gonna pump any,
I
any-
would suggest that this needs to have property boundaries on it. And
Okay.
so, and then maybe, just to make sure we're all on the same page, we could go through Mark's information.
Amy, let me just ask Andrew a question.
Yeah.
You say the property boundaries. This is not intended to be divided, correct? This is all going to be one piece of property.
Yeah, I would like
Yeah.
just to keep it as one piece.
So there is no,
No, Mark, I'm looking at this
Oh,
septic
oh,
tank,
at the
and I'm saying there's
HAG.
no boundary line here, so I can't really tell where
Where
this
it is.
1,000 gallon.
Okay, sorry.
What page is that, Amy?
It's, page 4 of, well, it's
The
actually
septic.
this, it's the septic thing. It's, Andrew,
We got this
Andrew
separate.
included it
Okay.
with the thing, so,
Was in the application.
yeah, it was in the application.
Okay, subsurface wastewater disposal.
So maybe if we just go through Mark's stuff, because I think Mark has pointed out some really
I see it, yeah.
important things here.
Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right,
I also wanted to maybe note something
Does he?
regarding the drive that you guys were talking about. Yeah, I mean, I don't see why we couldn't sort out a way where we meander a drive from, if they were interested, cutting through my space, and out along the ridges, filling a couple of the valleys. It's like a ripples on your tongue. We could easily do a thing like that. It just for the ease of traffic from Lucky onto 24, there might be a way we can do an alternate, I'd be up for it, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? I mean, we don't have to cut down many trees to do something like that. We can find a spot that works between the
Roads
trees
cost a
and,
lot.
you know, working over a couple rings
Roads are
here and there.
expensive.
Could be an egress, but it's, easy for
I
everyone.
think we're not,
This is not going.
Okay. Folks want to go through this, the findings here?
yep.
All right. There are lots of things that satisfy our requirements. There are a few that don't. We want to point that out to you. So let's go through the findings of fact. 15.1 of the site plan review ordinance, section 11, dimensional requirements.
Actually, I was wondering if
Before we get there,
Yeah.
can we talk about whether or not the submissions, the required submissions have been satisfactory in accordance with the ordinance?
You mean you're talking about the chart,
Well-
right?
No, I'm talking about the submission requirements, which is on
Here's-
page 2 of the memo.
That, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
particularly the site plan itself.
I guess, I wouldn't say I have a radical suggestion here, but there's a lot to digest here. And I think you have done a good job in terms of presenting a lot of information that's going to help make a decision. But there are some things that are lacking here.
Sure.
In the interest of time, I want to focus on the things that stick out to me as something that you're going to need. Because we can go through here and just say, yeah, okay, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. But there are some things that are not in here that need to be in here. One is how you're going to handle erosion control. That has not been addressed. That's important. The other thing is, with respect to, you're talking about making things, whether it's skiff or whatever your plans are, but there's nothing in here that talks about the potential for hazardous materials or, paint and things like, whatever.
It's gonna be more artisanal, like ceramic, or I recently took a class in
Well,
stained
that
glass.
That needs to be clear, because in a site like this, which is fairly confined, you're fairly close to people, we want to make sure that there's not going to be an issue there.
Sure.
And so those are major things that I see. And I'm almost leaning to, I want to make sure that we give this due diligence in fairness to you, and also the fact that we are getting a few things here at the last minute in fairness to the board. And I would just like to float the proposal of, we have another meeting on March 6th.
That's correct.
And it's not that far away. And I would like to make the suggestion that we take this back and add this to the agenda on March 6th, because we only have 2 items on the March 6th agenda, and they're not, if I'm not going to be mistaken, it's not going to take a whole lot of time to go through those two agenda items. They're pretty straightforward. This, to me, in fairness to you and in fairness to us, I think we need to look at this a little bit more closely.
Okay.
And I know you've been hanging in there for months and months, and I don't want to prolong the agony, if you will. But I would like to propose to the board that we recalibrate
You
all
can
of
just
it.
table this until the,
Table this until March 6th, to give us a chance to fully digest what's here, and to give you a chance.
I was gonna ask, how can I make sure that I have everything?
Well, we want to have an erosion control plan.
Yep, okay,
And we want to make sure that what is happening in these proposed retail maker areas, if you will,
that's what we're.
do not involve any hazardous materials.
yeah, I don't wanna work with anything hazardous.
Okay, well,
but yeah,
that needs to be clearly stated.
I'll mention
Okay.
it.
So, I mean, you have a lot of things here that are, you know, that will be satisfied with what you've presented. So you're not like starting from zero. We're talking about
Yep.
things that you can add.
Okay,
And then there's an issue about the radius of the driveway. Is it adequate to serve commercial delivery and emergency vehicles? I think you talked about maybe adding some space down.
yeah, and just that one thing, I put it on there tonight, but can I put
It
these
says
all on?
I mean, the fire, have you had the fire chief look at this?
We spoke back in March.
Okay, so I would like you to try to see if you can get the fire chief to say, here's what we want to do. Is this going to be adequate to get emergency vehicles in and out here? Because if you're talking about what you want to do here, we want to make sure it's safe.
Yeah, okay.
So, those are major areas that I think would help you get this through, would help us feel confident that we're making the right decision. And we also want to be fair to the people that live around you, to make sure we're doing due diligence. And we're going to be focusing on phase one. You know, you have like 4 phases here.
Yeah,
And I want to really have you focus on phase one.
right.
So
And
that
can I
we
keep that in an addendum instead of redoing the whole?
Yeah, let's focus on phase one, and if, recognizing that if you want to do phase 2, 3, or 4, you may end up with a roadblock. I mean, people will say, no, too much, whatever. But at least we want to get you to the point where you have an opportunity to move forward with this,
Right,
okay? So let's take it piece by piece. Let's do phase one.
okay,
And we'll focus on phase one and make sure that everybody's comfortable with what we're doing here. And, you know, you may reach a point where you're saying, hey, I don't want to do phase 2, 3, or 4 anymore. I mean, what we're doing here is enough, or, you know, what I've discovered is, you know, more than I can bite off. So, I think that makes sense from a lot of different directives.
sure, absolutely.
So if you agree to that, if the board agrees, that we table this until March 6th, that will give everybody an opportunity to,
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
I would just add to your recommendation that, the suggestion that the applicant really go through the planner's findings and really address them all.
and you have
You have
the,
a copy of it?
I got that today.
Yeah,
Okay.
and really make, yeah, you just got it today.
that gives you, that gives you a
Yeah.
chance
Oh, we
to.
just got it yesterday.
Yeah, we, you know,
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
let me add 2 things to your list.
I wasn't completely finished. if
Oh,
I
I'm
could.
sorry, I didn't
That's
know
all right.
you-
I just wanted to emphasize that we go through this with you.
Yep.
Make sure that that all of your concerns are addressed. And that we have one final phase 1 plan. That we're not looking at several different plans. We have one final phase 1 plan. Because I agree with Courtney, the applicant, you have a lot of ideas, and that's great. But we need to have a plan that the code enforcement office can look at, and we can look at, and sign off on, and then we can come back 6 months from then and say, he's doing exactly what he said he would do on this plan. He hasn't gone off on a tangent and decided to implement some new idea that he thinks is really fabulous, and maybe it is, but that's not on the plan.
No,
So we need to make sure that we're really on the straight and narrow.
sure.
Okay, and Mark, you had
Yeah,
some.
two things. I think the question about the DOT driveway permit is a germane question, sort of. The reason for the 99 trips is that if you have more than 100 peak hour trips, you have to get a traffic movement permit, go through a full traffic study, what have you. I don't think this level of development with the change to the retail, whatever, gets us to that. But I do think it would be helpful if Andrew could confirm with the Maine Department of Transportation that their driveway permit is applicable to what's now being shown as phase 1.
And a trip is
One way in.
one way
out.
in and one way out. So how do you have 99 trips?
Well, they said 99.
Somebody stays.
Because if it's 100, then it triggers.
Yeah, but
the-
I mean,
But shouldn't
unless
the
somebody
raffle
has a
be-
stalled vehicle,
Because
then
it's
we
a-
get 99
it's-
trips.
Wait,
It's a-
wait, I can't
Every 50 trips,
explain
somebody's gonna
why the
die.
Maine Department of Transportation said 99, other than there's gonna be a junkyard on the back of the lot and some of the vehicles
But I
aren't
guess what I'm
gonna
saying
come
is
out.
if a trip is one trip in and then 2 is out,
No, it has to do with peak hours.
But
If
it's-
the trip,
You can't have
if the
99
trip
trips.
doesn't occur in peak hours, it doesn't count.
Exactly.
Well, they have to
This is
exit.
peak hour
That's
trips.
crazy.
It's peak hour trips, so if
This is gonna be,
yeah, but
he comes in and leaves at non-peak hours, that's not a trip.
exactly.
okay.
So he could come in, he
hadn't
could
thought
come
about
in
that.
at 10 o'clock in the morning, which isn't a peak hour, and leave at 4:30 in the afternoon, which is the peak hour.
He only
And
gets
he
one.
creates one peak hour trip.
All right.
Wow.
But
So-
that's not
so-
important.
So here's, your application has created a whole bunch of
Make no
different
sense to me.
conversations and things like that. I mean, I think, I want to commend you for coming up with all these ideas and so on, but I really think for your benefit and for our benefit, my recommendation, my proposal is to table this until March 6th.
Yep. And all I'm saying is I'd like to confirm that the driveway permit is valid for what is now being proposed.
Okay, so I'll,
We'll take care of that.
Yep.
okay.
Second thing, Mr. Chairman, that
Yeah.
I'd like to do is normally for a project like this, the board would refer it to Goral Palmer for a peer review. At this point, Howard's shaking his head. Amy's nodding her head.
I'm saying, yes,
Well,
I'm following
but-
you.
But what I would like to do is I would like to ask Will Haskell what his take on the information is that's been provided. And that if he were asked by the planning board to review it for conformance with the standards, does he need anything else?
Okay, I will just add one thing. If he can do it in a timeline that would allow us to
But,
convene on
yeah,
March 6th.
by the 6th.
That's
yeah.
fine, but I don't want to, in fairness
No,
to the
no.
applicant, I don't want to drag this on
That's
forever.
sort of what I was shaking my head about. too.
Well, I mean, to me, the alternative is that you don't ask the question, and on May 6th, on March 6th, Amy moves to send it to Goral Palmer, and Goral Palmer says, we need this, we need that. I think we expedite the process by asking Goral Palmer if by the 6th, all is we're asking them not to review it, but to say, does this information give you the
Okay, well,
ability
that will
to
be
review
That will be
the
useful as
application?
long as we can get it in a reasonable time
Yep.
before March 6th.
Okay,
I think that's a really good
We
idea.
have to get it before March.
Ju- I don't want to belabor this
Yeah.
at all, but I think that this application was filed on October 27th. I'm just, there is a fairness element to
Exactly.
this.
Yeah,
and-
that's
and
what I'm-
So I
that's
think
what I
we
wanted.
really do have to move it along.
Exactly.
But in my opinion, the submission requirements have not been met.
Not
And
completely, no.
therefore,
No.
that time is important for fairness, but we're not on the hook yet
Right.
for any timing.
Yep.
We don't have X number of days, because the submission isn't adequate, and the staff has worked to try and make it so, and we can work some more between now and March 6th.
Yep.
But I think the first step is for us to make a determination on the 6th that now we have everything we
Right.
that meets the submission standards. We may not agree with everything that's in there, because we then have to look at the conditions, the approval standards. And anybody that's developing has to sort of take those approval standards and work backwards into what he's given us. Because while you may have met the submission requirements, you may not have met the approval standards. And at least that's what Mark tells us all the time. And so,
That's
and
absolutely
the
true.
approval standards in a site plan are complex,
Yeah.
complicated, and lengthy.
And that's
And
why,
so I don't want to get to the March 6th and then say, well,
yeah,
that's great, but you should have done this, this,
I
and
think
this.
this ought to be a focus of what we try to accomplish on March 6th.
Yep.
The
In
the only,
fairness to the
the
applicant.
last point I had is there was a question about engineered plans and requirement for, or a suggestion for engineered plans. I just don't think that that's in there, in the site plan ordinance. And that, and while it may be helpful in reaching the approval standards, it isn't required for their submission. And I think we've done in the past, like Morse's, for example, we've worked around that and enabled people
Yeah.
in town to draft their own plans. This is a better set of plans than Morse ever gave us.
Yeah,
So,
for sure,
you know, I think that we
for sure.
shouldn't hang our hats on that, but we still need the dimensional materials in order to meet the approval standards. So to the extent, in my mind, if I were making the decision on approval, the ability to determine where things are on the ground, how long they are, how wide they are, is it to scale so that we can try to figure that out? Those are important things, particularly when you have a roundabout where you have parking spaces that are very close to the roundabout, where you have a drive-through, and multiple lanes. I mean, we used to do fast food restaurants that are nightmares with dual
Yeah.
stacks.
Yeah.
And are there stacking problems, like Amy suggested? You don't know that if the cars that are on the plan are not to scale.
Yeah.
Yeah. May I ask one other question of the applicant? I'm looking at the signage that you've got here. This is just, you know, it's just a graphic. Would you try and come up with some signage that's
There's a
really,
page.
that's really, I saw it.
Okay.
I'm wondering if you would just try and keep it in keeping with Harpswell's character and maybe not make it look like it belongs on Pleasant Street in Brunswick.
Oh, that's exactly what I was going
And
for.
maybe not light,
It's going for Pleasant
maybe
Street.
not lit 24/7?
No, yeah, I'm, Morse's Lobster House sign, the pottery, what are those public signs we have?
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was gonna vibe off, and I thought my illustration might have shown that,
Okay. I looked at it, that's
it's in
not the
perspective,
feeling
it's on
I
the
got,
page.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
18 or so.
Okay, just thought I'd mention that.
All right, sir, we really appreciate your patience. I hope we understand each other.
Yeah,
And,
this is fine.
And let's nail this thing
Yeah,
on
well-
March 6th.
We'll catch up on the 6th, that sounds
All right.
great.
All right,
I
sir.
appreciate all your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys for coming and sharing your comments. All right, we've gone through the agenda.
Nope,
Yeah, we have not. That stuff is,
Looked like it to me.
oh, that's next time.
That's next week. We're on the 6th.
All right.
I told you not to
don't
hold
get
me
to
to
make the
the
report this-
7:15 timeframe, so I don't feel bad. Does anybody have anything else that they would like to bring up at this point in time?
Just I'd like to reiterate, I think it'd be really great for us to have a workshop on sedimentation and erosion control and, you know, that kind of stuff. Just so we can see, you know,
Yep.
what's involved with these new standards or these up-to-date standards.
Good idea.
Maybe that's after you're gone, Mark.
No, we can work that out. In fact, I know that Mary Ann is trying to work out a workshop on LID with the Cumberland County Soil and Water Conservation District.
Yeah.
Or Resource Conservation District, I guess it's called now. And let me check and see where that stands. They wanted money to do it and what have you. But we can talk about some things. There's some
Yeah.
fairly, I would call it, simple overviews of the LID standards and also the current stormwater standards that DEP has that
Yeah. One more thing too, I just thought of is the comp plan committee going to make a presentation to the planning board?
Well, we have a lot of stuff crammed in here. The planning board, I mean, the comprehensive plan is not gonna be voted on until a special town meeting in May. That decision was made by the select board after a number of discussions and so on. The reason is that even though we've hopefully done a good job in discussing pieces of this thing, we have not put it together in totality so that everybody has an understanding, okay, well, this is the way it looks from soup to nuts. So we were given basically a couple of months more to make that happen. Between now and basically the end of April, mid to late April, we have a number of different meetings scheduled, information meetings. There are gonna be 3 in March in different parts of the town. And that's specifically to identify and discuss, here's what the plan looks like in its totality, so that when the public hearing occurs in April, there's at least a modicum of understanding out there in the community about what this is all about. And then we take the public hearing results, fold in that, and then we bring forward the vote in May 11th, I think is the date, 11 or 12, something like that. So in terms of briefing the planning board, we hadn't scheduled that. I mean, if people would like to see that, what we're gonna try to do is put together some sort of a summary of the plan as a handout. And maybe we can make those handouts available. And if there are any discussion items that come up from the planning board, then we can address
It's
them.
not required to come to the planning board?
No, not,
I thought we established them.
What'd you say, Hal?
Planning board,
there's
it's
not
not
a
required
requirement.
to have a vote of the planning board for a comprehensive plan?
Actually, no, which
Really?
is very strange.
That's very strange.
But let me just fill in a couple blanks.
Are we still on TV?
Are we still on TV? Yeah, I mean, the Conference Plan Task Force will meet next Wednesday night to
28th.
review I'm gonna call it final draft of the entire comprehensive plan and send it to public hearing. The state law requires that there be 30 days notice and the draft upon which the public hearing is held be available for 30 days. So the plan is that the public hearing notice and the availability of the plan will be like March 5th or whatever. And then there will be a public hearing on April 8th or something like that on the final plan. The task force is scheduling 3, I guess you would call them probably informational
Right.
meetings toward the end of March.
Right.
One on Orr's Island,
Right.
one at Cundy's, and one on the Neck for that, and then people can come to the public hearing. There is enough time built in to the schedule, 2 weeks, that if there are things that come up at those informational meetings or at the public hearing that the task force thinks it needs to make changes, it can make changes in the draft and hold a second public hearing to meet the letter of the law. It only requires 3-day notice, et cetera. And then it's, whatever comes out of that goes to town meeting, special town meeting for a vote. I'm just gonna say, the All-Star Affordable Housing Working Group has an outreach program going on of meeting with other town committees, of meeting with organizations in the community, They are doing it, the members of the working group. And, you know, I think the alternative or the add-on of saying to people, come to a meeting at the Grange or whatever, is to target groups and go out. And also, my understanding was that you were also going to do something of the task force at town meeting? And if so, you need to make arrangements with the town clerk?
What
to
we're gonna
do
do
that?
is, what we were planning on doing was having a handout.
Right, but what you need to do is make a reservation for a spot, because there are only a limited number of spots, the tables that you can do that at. And the clerk needs to approve what you're gonna distribute at town meeting.
May I just say something for, I know, I'm with Howard, and I'm really like, what? There's no requirement that they come before the planning board? We deal with these issues every day, every month, every whatever. We are the feet on the ground dealing with these land use issues. We're in the trenches with these issues.
Hey, can we have a
And
meeting and have them come?
it just seems to me
Sure.
like that the planning board should at least have the courtesy of being able to have some input and some, just.
Well,
just
I
as
would
a-
suggest you talk to the chair of the task force about that, because
I just feel like this horse is out of the barn, and I just would like to express.
Wasn't the task force formed out of a mandate given to the planning board?
Correct.
So I would think that since it came from a mandate to the planning board, that it ought to come back to the planning.
I don't disagree with that.
Well, why
I
don't we
thought
just
that,
arrange it?
I thought there was a requirement for the planning board to hold a public hearing and make a recommendation. There is not in the ordinance,
Yeah.
or the rule bylaws committee that's revising the bylaws for the planning board could presumably address that.
But it's not part of state law. The state growth.
No, the state law requires the planning committee, which in this case is the task force, to hold a public hearing.
Well, can we make this happen? I mean, it sounds like people want it. Is it possible to make it happen?
Well, you should
We're just
talk
going
to-
around in a circle
You should
here.
talk to the chair of the task force.
What do you think, Mr. Chair? Do you have any time
I'd be happy to
at
do it. I
all?
mean, it seems like, let's try to figure out a date, and we'll try to.
Well, at
make it
least
happen.
the
It's not
land,
like
at
we're
least
trying
the
to-
land use section, I mean.
No, but we could do it in conjunction with another one of the scheduled.
Or a
meetings.
workshop or something like that. I'm
Yeah.
not sure what the workshop.
I'm not sure that we need to have, I'm not sure that we have to have a special thing convened just for the board, but
I hope you realized that this document is gonna be in close to 200 pages. So one of the issues that we have is distilling that down into 1 or 2 pages that covers the waterfront.
But a lot of that's the inventory stuff.
A lot of it is, yeah, 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it is inventory
Yeah.
stuff. But the inventory is important in the sense that it sort of justifies some of the things that are coming out of it. So it's not necessarily a straightforward thing to come out and say, well, we're gonna have a 1 or 2 page handout, or we're gonna be able to discuss this in the context of one meeting. I would say that there are gonna be elements of the comprehensive plan that are definitely in the wheelhouse of the planning board. Because a lot of the things that might come out of this thing may result in changes in ordinances, and so on. But For example, Mark has touted for the last X number of months the Affordable Housing Committee.
All-Star, the All-Star.
Yeah,
The
that's
All-Star
one,
Committee.
that's one,
I thought it was
Facet.
attainable.
that's one
It is
facet of the
attainable.
comprehensive
It's
plan.
attainable, but affordable is the
Yeah,
official
it's
title.
one
I wish it were
facet
not.
of the comprehensive plan. So just keep that in mind.
Major driver.
It's a horse of a different color. It's a,
Mr. Chairman,
yes,
at the risk of stepping in the deep doo-doo here, you could schedule a workshop before the planning board meeting on the 20th of March, at like 5:30. And to really focus not on the entire plan, but to pull out the land use sections, the housing sections,
Sure.
the future land use plan,
Yeah.
and do that.
If you recall, I'm kind of getting a little bit nervy here, but if you recall, we tried to do this a couple times before with the planning board,
And they didn't show up.
and they didn't show up. So, okay, we'll work on a date, and hopefully everyone will be able to show up.
Well, I think the date perhaps was not possible for some people. I don't think it was a lack of
Whatever the
interest.
reason.
Yeah. If it's before our planning board meeting, we've got that set aside.
Okay, all right,
Yeah.
well, let's work on that. I have no problem.
Howard?
Oh, I think we've reached diminishing returns here.
I agree.
All right.
I agree.
Well, thank you all.
Anything else before we adjourn? It's 8:26. Mark, we didn't meet your schedule
I
again.
know.
Hearing nothing else, the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.